This area of New York City is usually overlooked, despite it being in the middle of Manhattan. We are right now at 7th Avenue, which is the heart of the garment district. 7th Avenue is as synonymous with fashion as Wall Street is synonymous with finance. But why? And why is fashion so important to New York? And why is New York one of the fashion capitals of the world, along the ranks of Paris and Milan? Well, that dates back to this very neighborhood. Let's walk around the garment district and learn about its history in 30 minutes or less. Welcome everyone, I'm Ariel with Urbanist and we are at the garment district. This is the largest collection of industrial skyscrapers in all the world. More than 130 buildings here rising towards the skies, putting a lot of these side streets in the shadows, and we're going to walk along one of the specific streets. However, our very first stop is this amazing pair of sculptures. Here is the garment worker and the needle and thread, made by Judith Weller back in 1996. And this is an example of the many, more than 100,000 workers in the garment district. However, why did the garment district move up here? Well, they originally started in the Lower East Side in tenements, making garments in crowded, hot, sweaty apartment buildings, where the term sweatshop comes from. But that wasn't good for working conditions, and also many of the wealthy of New York were afraid of disease being spread through the garments. It was a time before germ theory or the knowledge of viruses. New Yorkers decided to outlaw a lot of these tenement factories, and the garment industry had to move northward. First to the Greenwich Village, where they encountered a building going ablaze, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. And then more heavy regulation came, all the way until they moved up here in 1921. And this is an example of the many men that were here. It was started by the Eastern European immigration. A lot of these Eastern European men and women, who were mostly Jewish, already knew how to sew, were already sewers and garment workers in their home countries. So they came with the necessary skills, and they didn't need English in order to work in this industry. Here we have the needle and thread, and also the kiosk is currently under repair, but back in 2020, this will be open again, giving information and map guides for the garment district. Right here, 550 7th Avenue, back in maybe 10 years ago, but definitely for many decades, you would constantly see limousines parked right in front. These limousines might be driving the likes of Oscar de la Renta, Calvin Klein, Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan, and many others, because those four giants of the fashion industry were located right here at 550 7th Avenue. This was kind of the hub of high-end fashion for many decades. A lot of them moved out. Ralph Lauren went to Chelsea only about 10 years ago, and Calvin Klein moved elsewhere, and Donna Karan moved, luckily, a few storefronts down. We'll pass by it later. Let's continue walking through towards our next stop. Now, fun fact about Ralph Lauren comes from the Bronx, and he started his fashion label back in 1967. His original name was Ralph Lifshitz. However, Lifshitz doesn't sound too good for a high-end clothing brand. He changed his name to Lauren. Calvin Klein was also another Bronx Jewish American who started his label back in 1968. Very controversial for his underwear ads back in the 1980s specifically. And then Oscar de la Renta, he was a Dominican man who moved to Madrid, Spain to be mentored by Balenciaga, one of the most iconic fashion designers in the entire world. He ended up taking control of Arden and then opening up his own label here. He passed away just a few short years ago. Now, as we're walking through, it's so important to always look up because there's these huge buildings, and keep in mind that these weren't built for offices nor residential. These were built to house industry. The garment industry was from the making of the fabrics, the making of the textiles, to marketing, to packaging, to selling, and to even offering the goods in stores. The reason that they built in 7th Avenue was its close proximity to the stores on 5th Avenue and also to the major department stores being built right in 34th Street. Right there, we see an old sign of the garment industry. Oh, that's so interesting. Look up in this neighborhood because you'll bump into a lot of old signs. Here's DKNY, Donna Karan, New York. Now, Donna Karan, at the age of 26, was working as one of the designers for Anne Klein. Anne Klein passed away and the Japanese company bought it over. They didn't know too much about fashion, so they had no idea who to make head designer. Anne Klein, at the only age of 26 years old, became the head designer of Anne Klein. It was a huge promotion for Donna Karan. A few years later, in the early 80s, she ended up starting her own label, Donna Karan, and a few years after that, DKNY, becoming one of the largest brands in the world. Donna Karan was another Jewish American who came from Forest Hills, Queens. And look at the gorgeous buildings in the sunlight. It's kind of a gorgeous sight to look at. Just a few blocks down and we are at Penn Station. But let's go up 37th Street. So you'll still see garment industry here. Look at the windows above and you'll see garment makers, design houses, fashion businesses, marketing businesses as well associated with the fashion business. One pro tip, here's Zaro's bakery. A lot of the immigrants that came here were German and Eastern Europeans, and they would eat a lot of the goods that would be sold in this bakery. Not the specific bakery, but this bakery sells pretzels, bagels, and black and white cookies. One of the best ones in my opinion.
If you're bored, go home.
I feel like everybody on the team.
Now in the comments below, let me know, what is your favorite place to shop? I'm very curious because a lot of these places to shop traces its roots back here to New York City. But what was the garment district before ever was a garment district? Before ever there was stores where you could buy wholesale dresses or wedding dresses or trimmings? Well, we have to go back to 1870 when this church was built, the Church of Holy Innocents. This church was built in a time way before the era of industry in this area. This was a very low rise. Buildings didn't get any taller than this church. This church really stuck out, and it was in an area called the Tenderloin. It was called the Tenderloin because a NYPD officer was promoted to work here from Lower Manhattan. His name was Clubber Williams. And Clubber Williams said, "For most of my life, I've been eating chuck steak But now I have the opportunity to have a good tenderloin. Meaning that for most of his career in downtown Manhattan, he only had very mediocre bribes, working at 5 Points. Most of the lower class didn't offer him good bribes. But here in the Tenderloin, in a place filled with gambling dens, cabarets, brothels, this was a spot to get some good money. The name stuck. It stuck so much that the Tenderloin ended up becoming a catch-all name for the red light districts all around America. So much so that it has stuck in San Francisco, where there is still a Tenderloin district, and it's one of the most notorious places in San Fran. Let's take a look inside the church. It's the Church of Holy Innocents, 1870. I gotta be quiet as we go into the church, so let's walk in.
Gracious grant us amid all the changes of this life, we may be so strengthened by the constant protection of the semi-man that ever Marys, as a to milk the world of thy eternal redemption. Thou who livest and reignest world without end. Prayer to Saint Joseph.
So service is going on right now, and this is a Catholic church. The issue is, when in 1921, when the Garment District decided to move up here towards 7th Avenue, most of them were Jewish. So a lot of the original residents, which were Irish Americans and African Americans, no longer really came to church. And this kind of lost a lot of, first, its students in its nearby Catholic school. The Catholic school was sold off to a company for $100,000 to build their offices. But the church also owned the lots behind it, and they sold that lot for $375,000 back in 1924. What did they build in that lot? Well, let's walk around. Now, the garment industry was starting to creep up Fifth Avenue. They were at Fifth Avenue right by Ladies Mile. So that was between 14th Street and 23rd Street. Ladies Mile was the premier shopping destination in the late 1800s, 1890s. It was the place where you can find the very first department stores of America. Lots of high-class women would shop there all day long. However, since the garment industry was right next door at Fifth Avenue, during lunchtime, it would be packed to the brim with a lot of garment workers going out for lunch. All of them men. Hundreds of thousands. Well, definitely thousands. Maybe up to 100,000 workers were working in that area. New Yorkers did not like that. So there was a huge campaign on the ad on New York Times posted, "Shall we save New York from the garment industry?" Real estaters, many of New York City's aristocracy vowed to give the garment workers, the garment owners, a hard time if they were to move further up on Fifth Avenue, encroaching on the mansions of Fifth Avenue around 50th Street. Thus, the garment workers decided to relent and move beyond 6th Avenue and towards 7th. One such building was the Fashion Tower, the lot behind the church, which sold its property rights for $375,000. This building was constructed for $1 million. The architect was Emery Roth. And this is probably the most ornate of all the Garment District buildings. These buildings are mostly all meant just for industry, so they're not meant to be as ornate as the buildings we see in Ladies Mile or as we see in Fifth Avenue. But this one is ornate, and it's still preserved. Right in front we see these beautiful plaques of peacocks, which symbolize vanity. It's always been associated with fashion since early European lore. Further up, it's a little bit hard to see from this angle, but I'll be posting a photo right next to here is a woman, two women looking at a mirror. Beautiful tower. Here we have more garment stores. Lots of these are wholesale dresses. Wholesale means you have to buy a larger amount, not just one. You have to buy maybe 10, 20, 30 more. Now, the garment district has no height limits, so who knows what could be the future of this neighborhood. However, there are movements to preserve a lot of these industrial buildings because it has a unique character in New York City. The garment district was almost moved all the way to Sunset Park, Industry City in Brooklyn. It would have been very far away to move it. And luckily that hasn't happened yet. Garment district is still here, lingering on. However, it's way more important than we think. And I think most people know. Let me get into that just after I show you these two buildings. Right here, these two buildings flanking 37th Street on 7th Avenue. This is the Garment Capital Center. These were the very first high-rises of the garment district, built in 1921. These buildings cost a fortune, and it was built by Jewish American real estate owners, hired Jewish American architects, and inside were all Jewish American businesses. So it was a very self-insular business for that minority group. However, I mentioned about the Tenderloin. What happened to the Tenderloin? Well, this building came, and in the subsequent 10 years, over 130 skyscrapers were built all around the garment district, completely overshadowing and destroying the Tenderloin. Tenderloin was never seen again. I guess Clubber Williams had to go back to chuck steak. Let's take a look down 37th again. Now we're going towards 8th Avenue, so we're kind of zigzagging through. Down there is Times Square. Now, if you were to come back here in 1950, this would be filled to the brim with trucks, filled to the brim with men pushing racks of clothing. Their names were push boys. Funnily enough, they weren't boys. Most of them were middle-aged men. And they weren't really pushing. They were mostly pulling. The reason they were pushing clothing racks all around the neighborhood constantly, all throughout the day, was because there was this system called jobbers and contractors. Jobbers were kind of the middlemen that would hire specific contractors of sewers who would sew specific parts of the garments. That ended up making a system where not a dress wasn't made in just one single location. A dress could be made up to 5 different locations in the garment district. And thus, that's why you would see a lot of these madness of clothing racks being pushed back and forth. Here we see one of the architectural quirks of a lot of these buildings, a driveway that goes through from one side of the street to the other. The reason that they did that, they also did that with freight elevators and also with lobbies, because they want to build the elevators right in the middle of the building, maximizing space for the rest of these lofts. Here we see another older sign. It says Dover Building. And I'll show you one of the lobby arcades that goes from one end of the street to the other. Here's a sewing shop, a sewing repair shop. The sewing necessities. And right here is one of the building arcades. So it goes through to the other side of the street. And in through those elevators is Mood Fabrics. Right down here is mostly just the home store, upholstery store. But on the second, third, and fourth floor is Mood Fabrics, the home of Project Runway. Project Runway started in 2004 and kind of lifted the veil of the fashion industry. A lot of people didn't know what happened in the fashion industry before Project Runway. And Project Runway is a reality show where different fashion designers compete against each other to win different competitions of challenges. One of these challenges is that they have to get fabrics under a certain amount of time, and Move Fabric is the home ever since for all 18 seasons for them to get fabrics. Well, not for all 18 seasons. There was actually one season that took place in LA. So for almost all the seasons. And it came with a similar, for a very famous sayings like, "Thank you, Mood," and also for a famous dog whose name is Swatch. Now, for a little more context, lunchtime. I mentioned Ladies Mile was the reason why, Ladies Mile during lunchtime was the reason why the garment industry moved northward and westward towards 7th Avenue. Well, lunchtime was still madness here in the garment industry from 1921 all the way to the heyday, which probably ended around the 80s. Tens of thousands of men would come out here thinking there were probably up to 200,000 employees around there, 100,000 to 200,000 employees at any given time. So tens of thousands would be out here at any given time in the middle of the street. So many men were outside that they would actually close down the streets and they would congregate around here. Maybe some of them would gamble, some of them would eat their lunch very quickly and just network. Some of them would go to lunch clubs in certain garment buildings and woo buyers to buying merchandise. And that came an interesting system of lunches. One certain system of buying lunch was to set up a lunch place in a freight elevator. Here's El Sabroso, Latin American food in a freight elevator. Very good quality and very inexpensive. So here you can buy roast pork, pernil, which is, you can buy chuletas, pork chops, all classic Puerto Rican dishes. And that also represents a lot of the minority group that ended up taking control of the garment district around, say, the 1960s and 70s. The reason that 1960s started changing radically was because a lot of the Jewish Americans that were descendants of the original business owners started dying out. So they started selling their businesses to other groups that were already working here. One of those groups mainly were the Puerto Rican Americans. Here is a good espresso recommendation. This is Romini Espresso, great espresso and cold brew right here. And you'll still see people carrying around fabrics here in New York City. So just in time for Fashion Week, during every February and every springtime, you'll see hundreds of budding fashion designers shopping here in order to make it onto the runway. Fashion industry is crucial to New York City's history because major brands like Calvin Klein, Ralph Lauren, Oscar de la Renta, Donna Karan, and many, many others, even sportswear, ski wear, blue jeans were all started here in the fashion district. This is a very important neighborhood, so when you're walking through the fashion district, through the garment district, be sure to look up. Be sure to walk into the stores like Mood Fabrics, B&J Trimmings, and Daytona Trimmings, and many, many others. You'll enjoy yourself. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I'm Ariel with Urbanist. Keep being awesome and always keep on exploring. I'm Ariel with Urbanist. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to see more videos of exploring cities all around the world and its history, please subscribe and click that bell button for notifications. Also, if you want to support this channel and get access to exclusive videos, go to patreon.com/urbanist. Keep being awesome and always keep on exploring.